can just lay them off easily. That's why such a large proportion of the workforce has now been coming in through labour brokers.
Doc, you've done research into mining and related communities. Let me ask you, this entire idea about this strike, well, as far as AMCU is concerned, aiming to change the pay structure, the historical pay structure that put miners at the poverty end of this economy. To what extent has the strike changed that?
I think it has been a significant step forward, both within monetary terms but also within political terms. In monetary terms, the pay rise which the workers have won has been quite substantial. I mean, an 18% rise on basic pay is really quite an achievement. And of course, let's bear in mind that the agreements are effective from July of last year at Amplats and Impala. So that means as from next month, workers are going to see their pay packets going up, not by just the extra R1,000 a month for the first year, but by an extra R1,000 on top of that for the second year. So their pay packets are going to be R2,000 better off per month as from next month. And then within just over a year from this, we're going to be seeing ourselves getting into a new round of negotiations again. So in terms of moving out of the historic structure of low pay, moving to the figure of the living wage of R12,500, a figure the mine workers themselves came up with, this has definitely been a big step forward if it didn't achieve it. So that's the first point. The second point, the politics of it, I think are really maybe even the bigger impact of this, what it's opened up. It's done so really within a number of ways. I mean, first of all, it's absolutely shone a light on the abysmal and appalling conditions in which our mine workers have been living and labouring in post-apartheid South Africa. A story, I think, which had really been hidden from the public domain for the past 20 years. And I don't think there's anybody in South Africa now who doesn't know about the conditions in informal settlements like Umkeneng near Marikana, who have some understanding of the hardships which mine workers face in their everyday lives. So that's a shift in the public consciousness, and I think you can see that in the degree of support the mine workers have been getting within the public domain. But on top of that as well, it's raised bigger questions really about the distribution of revenue, of the distribution of wealth within this core industry within South Africa, which reflects these bigger questions within South African society. One of the most unequal in the world now, a society which is becoming more unequal, and really the massive contrast between, on the one hand, the low pay of the mine workers, and on the other hand, the large pay of the executives and the even greater payouts to international shareholders. Again, all of this has come into the public domain, and it's really made us question what our social values are and where they're leading in post-apartheid South Africa.
Let's talk about how we got to this deal, particularly in the platinum sector. The way we got to this deal, is it taking us closer to collective bargaining in the platinum sector? I would imagine contracts or agreements were signed with separate firms, yeah, but essentially this was a collective agreement, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Devon. I mean, who can predict exactly which way it's going to go? But there's no question that de facto collective bargaining was forced upon the employers who hitherto had resisted it vehemently. And the reason why they had resisted it vehemently in the past was actually because of the extreme competition between them, between the big players like Impala and Impala Platinum and Lonmin within the labour market. I mean, let us not forget that Platinum went through the most extraordinary boom period between 2000 and 2008, absolutely unprecedented in the history of the metal. And this was accompanied by huge expansion of existing mines and the openings of new ones, which led to key labour shortages within key skilled areas, including areas like the rock drill operators. And because of that, different mining companies were competing for workers. And the only way in which they could do that was through pay differentials. And in fact, that's one of the key tensions behind the big outbreak of strikes and so forth in 2012. So they wanted the room to manoeuvre to be able to offer different wages. Now it looks as if we're moving towards a collective bargaining situation, equalisation and parity across the sector. But whether that will remain in place post the strike is a really interesting question.
Now, before I let you go, this entire question of ownership in the future, getting workers more included in the profits that are made by mining companies. Joseph Matunjwa said this morning that in the negotiations and in future talks, they will talk about share options for mine workers. Is this an eventuality, and will it work?
Well, it's very hard to say whether it's going to be an eventuality, because even if the trade union leadership think that may be a way to go, the members may not. So this will obviously have to be a debate within the union. In terms of will it work if it did happen, well, I'm not so sure. I mean, there have been experiments with share ownership schemes across the mining industry in recent years, and actually the record of success hasn't been particularly great, to be honest with you. Workers still feel that they're not seeing the returns that they should do. Of course, the point about shares and share dividends is in the boom years that they get paid out, in the bad years they don't. So workers are going to be subject to that sort of uncertainty, potentially, unless there's some mediating mechanism. But also, as well, one could argue that they then become complicit in their own exploitation. We have to work ourselves harder to benefit ourselves a bit more. But the really big shareholders are going to remain the institutional investors, largely overseas, and they're the ones we've found so far who see the benefit of such schemes.
Dr. Gavin Capps from Wits University, thanks very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you, Devin.
We'll take a look at more business news after the